Hello, future viewers. StreamYard has informed me that it's good to greet the audience who may be watching this in replay, and that's what I'm doing now. As of this moment in real time, no one is watching, so I'm just going to make up fake words for a couple 30 seconds or so until people say something. And there's some really spicy stuff happening on Twitter that I'm not going to talk about, but I'm sure somebody else will. But I had a good idea for a video, and then the discussion that Paul put out to everybody on his channel today. I'm only the cheap member, so I didn't get to see it early. But the conversation that he had with the megachurch guy, someone who I closely resonate with in the experience, and certainly answering that question of, well, this is the tradition that I was born into, so shouldn't I stay with this one? Isn't this the most traditional thing to do? But I also believe that there are some specific advantages. There's specific advantages over other traditions that the evangelical megachurch movement has, and those things are some of the reason for why they are achieving success. And I think, as he was describing his church, they're not being overly emotional or anything like that, but they're having a lot of success because they're doing the right things. And there's it's sort of hard to figure out, if you always want to attribute success to because people are shallow. That's just a sort of pessimistic view of people in general that kind of makes some gets into this problem of elitism, which I will talk about in a moment. But I wanted to play a little section of the video from today. Let's see. Okay, so this part here,
and that is almost for Jordan Peterson. I wonder if what could get him out of the slump that we all perceive, we all think he's in, we don't know, is some wilderness time. Maybe not emotionally. I know he went through his health issues, but I mean even more just resourcefulness. If he had to get a little bit more scrappy and it wasn't just like, well, I'm just going to do this, this, and this, and this. You know what I mean? I don't know. And engage on the ground a little bit more. But can he ever go back?
Yeah.
I don't know if he could ever go back.
That's just it. He would have to get... It could happen. Again, it could happen if he becomes a has-been.
Right.
Because has-beens, fame is a fickle creature. And if you become publicly unfamous and sort of, there are plenty of Hollywood stars that, I live in Sacramento, I don't live in LA, but there are plenty of Hollywood famous, but and really helped Jordan hit that spot when he did between 2016. Many hours he would spend, but he's also in some ways sort of structured his life arc back there. You've got Peterson Academy, and to not go back there, you've got Peterson Academy, and you've got ARC. And so he has sort of launched off into new endeavors, which fair enough. These are things that he cared about. He wanted to remake the university, and Peterson Academy is an attempt at that. He wants to revive Western culture. ARC is an attempt at that. So he's sort of, and he's not getting any younger.
I was muted. I muted myself, which is the right thing to do when you're playing the video. But I wanted to, so there was 2 points in there kind of at the beginning, at the end. So the beginning part is Peter's wilderness, and can he go back? He's not the same old Peterson, and he doesn't have the same fun things that he used to enjoy at the beginning of his endeavor, which is all true. And then Paul makes the point at a certain point about he's launched Peterson Academy and he's launched ARC. Now, I think that this is really important, and I would say overall, it's not that, like, necessarily that Peterson has maybe said it in this explicit of terms, but the first great boost about Jordan Peterson, like what made him a cultural phenomenon, was that he was reaching young men, he was resonating with young men, and he was giving young men a hope and a vision and a passion. And here's the thing, he was operating, like Al's in the comments, so maybe I'm sure he'll have good things if I drop the link and come in. He had his like Buddha moment or whatever when it came to the academic world and the greater like liberal project, as to see like, oh, this society is crumbling. It's at the end of its lifespan here as things are. And so I think that in some ways, he gave this message to young men that helped some young men, the men that were already had a little bit of a foothold in that old world, guys that had gone to college, were in college, or were able to find some sort of a career. And you hear a lot of stories from young men who basically took his advice about responsibility and it helped them out. But you were already like at a certain level if you were getting into Jordan Peterson, lectures and things. That meant you already had a certain amount of like intellectual interest and engagement in things that you could take his ideas, you could integrate them into your own life, and you could make that jump to like successful adulthood that basically our institutions have been failing to do. And so this is the point I wanted to make about institutions, which is something people like to talk about. And I want to stop that, and I'm going to share something else. There's a lot of talk about institutions, elites versus populist, the populist section of the population, large movements and things like that. And so like you'll have a critique of like MAGA is a populist movement, and that's why it's not going to really last, because it doesn't have the institutional backing around it or whatever. And if you look at this video, I'm not really going to play this, but it came up. This was Jordan B. Cooper talking about Redeemed Zoomer's Reconquista project. And the interesting thing is that both of these guys are really big, both Jordan B. Cooper and Redeemed Zoomer are really big on the need for institutions and the need for a cultural elite. And I would say there is truth to that. But the problem is that both guys kind of have their heads have wrapped around a definition of what it means to be an elite and what it means to have a cultural institution that are at this point antiquated, outdated, not really as relevant as before. So this was funny because Jordan B. Cooper was basically saying, here's all the things that are wrong with Redeemed Zoomer's project, but his solution is more or less, we just need to go back to getting advanced degrees and having the people that have gone to good schools be in charge of things. And, even Jordan Cooper has a whole thing of like, we need to dress a certain way. And Cale Zeldin's all on board with that, dress up in suit coats and, be which does also go along with Jordan Peterson's thing. He kind of did that. I mean, interesting enough, with Jordan Peterson, that was an organic phenomenon. He never told people to dress up, but they just started doing it. They started dressing it up because they were emulating him, which is really showing you something about how much of a more powerful elite influencer Jordan Peterson was than any of these other people that are trying to capture the zeitgeist or whatever. So I'm going to get to this. So here's the thing. And this is what I think happened. Jordan Peterson's message did take off. It took off, and some small portion of young men who were already, they were disadvantaged in comparison to, because all men are more or less disadvantaged now because of the way that culture's gone, but they were less disadvantaged than the majority, I would say. And those men were able to capture what he was saying, put it to good use, and benefit from it. However, I think that what Jordan came to, realize is he's looking at those institutions, college, the university, academia system, and that's become a failure. And then you look at ARC, which is more of this thing to recapture all of Western culture and its institutions, essentially recognizing that their current models are also a failure. And so what I think he understood is that he cast a vision and then realized that the infrastructure needed for most of his followers and potential followers to actually capitalize on the wisdom that he was sharing is not there. And somebody like Redeemed Zoomer, he's saying we need to go back and recapture those institutions. Jordan Cooper's actually saying, no, those institutions actually are more or less irrelevant now, as far as like Episcopal churches and the universities that maybe they're associated with. Capturing the churches is not going to capture the university. I don't, for the most part, they've been separated, I think. But what we have seen is that the thing that it's, why did these institutions lose their power? Why do they fall away? And it's because parallel structures that are superior come in and replace them. And we've seen this most recently with the rise of the internet and its replacement of mainstream media, specifically in these social media platforms, stuff like this on YouTube, things that happen on Twitter, replaces the news. It replaces the discourse that might have been happening in like think tanks or something. And this is all still very grassroots in some way. So this is kind of the problem, is that getting from a grassroots place to an institution is very difficult. So with Peterson Academy, like, that's a really good idea. And I think that it's absolutely necessary because the college system is inefficient and it's not providing the services that it once did. The best services that it probably did provide, or for a long time, its most useful aspect has been its networking possibilities, more so than the education. The education is easily transferable online, and increasingly the networking abilities are also becoming better online. As for like the execution of it, Peterson Academy, I've heard some people, Jacob Federecci paid for it, checked it out, said some of the things that they're saying are like way better than what you learn in a class, but it doesn't have the full course load, or it doesn't give you quite as much in depth as you really do get in a full load of college classes. So it is lacking in some way. I had originally thought that it would be smart to sign up for, and I thought about doing it myself because formally, I have a certificate from one college, I have a GED, and everything else is kind of stuff I have to write up on a resume to make it look good or whatever. I don't have that thing where I can just say, here's my degree. And I thought if I went and did it, there's probably was some value in being one of the first people to go through the program. That might still be the case, but it really depends on if there was employers that were really excited about it. Like if there was employers or institutions backing this thing that are really excited about what it's going to produce, and they're going to essentially be there to say, like, we're going to hire the first class of graduates, then it would have been a smart thing to get in early, because there's always some value in getting in on something early. Like, so much of these social media platforms, they are just shaped to reflect the stuff that was happening in the early days. Like, that sets the tone that lasts for a long time. So I think Peterson was really smart in those endeavors. But the problem is that he's just trying to do it entrepreneurially. He's trying to do it from scratch, grassroots, organic. And what would have been the greatest benefit to him is if he could have paired with an institution that had some more capacity. But obviously he's not going to just sign up with a college, because that is like the same thing. He's trying to do a different format than college, because he recognizes that not only are colleges corrupted, the format itself is sort of over. It's gone to its limit, and there needs to be something new. So he's experimenting with format as well. However, there is, that doesn't mean you have to start from scratch. And this is where I think that the best solution that he could have landed on would have been to partner with evangelical churches, like the one that, what was his name? Eric, is that what his name was? The one that he works at, where they're able to raise money, build these buildings, but also, as he's talking about it, and this is true of many evangelical churches, they have a building that they want to put to use 7 days a week. Sunday morning is for the church time, and the rest of it is to be used however they want. So, he's thinking, yeah, we got to get estuary stuff in there, but you could easily be using that space and those resources, that infrastructure, for a college alternative education. In fact, this was one of what the program that I went to was like, and it was connected to a network of churches, and there was like, I don't know, maybe close to 100 of these, and probably more outside of my particular denomination, many such programs. The problems were they were limited in the scope. They were mainly focused on training people to work in churches rather than train people with skills that could be more broadly applicable to the marketplace. That was a downside. But the flexibility of the infrastructure that they had could have easily adapted to those things. And, and I think even Peterson, recognizes this. There was a story told on Michaela's podcast about the breakfast place that he liked, and then there was like a new owner or something, and they had a new cook, and it used to be really great food, and then the food wasn't good anymore. And so then he goes back in the kitchen and he shows the chef how to cook the food the right way, which is like a crazy thing to do. And it's crazy because it's Jordan Peterson doing it, but that's a very easy thing to do that made a very big impact. It was a moment, an apprenticeship moment. And Jordan Peterson, his talents are wasted if he's just going around training short order cooks, but he's demonstrating a principle that somebody doesn't need to be an expert, doesn't need to be a doctor of psychology. If they know a skill a little bit better than somebody else, they can share that with them, and you bring more competency into the workplace. So that's my thing, is that Jordan Peterson would have been smart if he could have partnered with those evangelical churches. Now, to get to the Twitter thing, of course, you have Jonathan Pajot complaining about mega churches on Twitter, and that's probably a big part of the reason why Jordan more or less wrote off that. He has had some people on, some evangelical people, that I think probably he could have, done really well with or something. Like he had Greg Laurie on, he had Dallas Jenkins on, and Tim Tebow, and those are guys who are involved in actually making a big cultural difference. And like that's the thing, if you think that building a cathedral in 2025 is going to be more culturally important than Dallas Jenkins writing and directing The Chosen, you're crazy. The Chosen will have a much bigger impact than any building that is constructed in our lifetime, probably, because it's going beyond. It's in the here and now, and you can have criticisms of it, but criticizing it doesn't do anything. Tim Tebow, his conversation with Jordan was excellent. I feel like Tim Tebow, I don't think I'd ever really gotten to hear much interesting from him, almost because evangelicals don't know how to ask him the right questions. Jordan Peterson asked him far more engaging questions about competitiveness and a whole bunch of stuff about like masculinity and things like that. And he was very knowledgeable. It was a really excellent conversation. It was probably the best interview anybody's had as far as getting good stuff out of Tim Tebow, which is to say, you know, that's a downside of evangelicalism. They see as an athlete and they just say, ooh, celebrity. But anyway, so these guys, directors and athletes and megachurch pastors and people like that, like they are having a very big cultural moment. Right now, it is more populist. They don't have an elite, as it would say, or as of right now, we don't recognize the status of their elite. So, like Dallas Jenkins isn't, he's not an elite filmmaker, even though his films have now made a ton of money or super successful. You know, he's got this goal for them to be seen by like 1 billion people or something like that. But he's not recognized institutionally. He's not recognized as an elite, but he is. He is an elite in this sense. If you criticize The Chosen, you cannot have as big of an impact on The Chosen by criticizing The Chosen. The only thing that will match the impact that The Chosen has is for somebody else to make a similar product better or different. And that's anytime anybody criticizes, I say, you couldn't make a better one. And if you can, you should. So if somebody thinks that they can make a better television program about the life of Christ and the things that are going on with his disciples, they should. So far, his is the best that has been made. It's got a lot of good stuff about it, even though there's some faults. It's groundbreaking. It's a new thing. It's like literally, it's a very innovative thing. And in some sense, because it is cutting edge and innovative, it doesn't seem elite. But eventually, when the whole Bible is watchable in various video formats, which is something that could happen like a lot faster with AI, people will look back to The Chosen and say that was a groundbreaking moment. It is today. I mean, it is today. That's what I'm saying. But here's where I want to get to. There is a need for elites because of the elite set a vision. They offer legitimacy. I'd say, okay, so like somebody like that got mentioned in that podcast is like Rick Warren. Rick Warren is an elite when it comes to planting new churches. If you want to start a new church, he's among the elite. That's a very niche thing. But like the Orthodox, if they want to expand their reach and they find the land and the money they need for their cathedrals, there's probably some strategies they could learn from Rick Warren. Just saying that's true. That's a true thing. I'm not saying it's good or bad or anything. But in general, the elite are the ones that set the vision. They set the tone. So some of these, and that is, Peterson is definitely an elite, I would say. And what he's trying to do with ARC is to capture the elite, the current elite, most of them, and try to like bring them into the future. But we also have an emergent elite, and the emergent elite is the Silicon Valley class of tech entrepreneurs, because you can't say that people like Elon Musk, J.D. Vance, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, those guys are elites now. They didn't necessarily go to the right schools and have the right credentials. They didn't come from the right families that were in the previous era. That was an important aspect of it. They didn't go to the right mainline churches, which was important, a generation further back. But now they dictate so much of how we live and communicate and so much of the infrastructure of the world that they are the elite. Because if somebody changes something on a platform like X or YouTube, that has a bigger impact than any cultural moment, that like an artist is going to do. And essentially, they have the power to highlight what cultural artifacts are seen and viewed and valued. Now, they are sort of doing it based on just popularity, which is kind of not the greatest. Like there should be more of a telos. But the point I want to make about this is, okay, so you need an elite, but then the elite has the ability to direct the populace. And so far, like a lot of those elites have just been content to leave the populace as a class of consumers, and that's how they value them. And sadly, many churches view the populace the same way. They view people that fill the seats as a means of revenue. They provide the service of the worship experience or the liturgy, and they are that's the exchange. Maybe you give some money and you support what's going on, but that's about as deep as it goes. But within our culture, there is a massive population of people that are being underserved, and this is basically the young men. The young men, 60% of them don't go to church, 60% of them don't graduate college. Even amongst those who do go to church and have graduated college, they don't have the clear roadmap towards the quality of life that they wanted or expected, and certainly not what men expected 20, 30 years ago. But what they have, just because of who they are, this is the thing, that is a severely undervalued population that has the greatest potential to change the future. And so essentially, whoever gives a vision that will capture the attention of those young men and give them a purpose and has the institutional structure to fulfill that purpose, that will dictate what the culture is 50 years from now, 100 years from now. Because right now you just have this massive portion of young men who are being told, like, just be in your parents' basement and be the Netflix box, and that. Yes, I said that. But Jordan Cooper's problem is that he doesn't have a vision. He said that you should just leave liberal churches and go to conservative ones. Instead, you should stand up and be a Jordan Peterson type. And so essentially, like, Jordan Peterson captured the energy of this moment, but he didn't have a place where he could direct these young men, where they could connect with real people in real life. And what I'm saying is that whoever does it, whoever captures the attention of those young men and gives them a roadmap towards the future, gives them a vision that they can devote themselves to, that is the elite who will dictate what the next iteration of Western culture is. Now, the scary thing is that you could very easily see like the appeal of a radical Islam or something, or some other movement. Like that's what if Altist, he talks about, like the incel revolution that's going to come, and that is a very serious danger if the pressure that is building in the lives of the young men is not channeled somewhere productive. It will result in something very bad, or it will be captured by something very bad. Some sort of a woke right thing, or it could be like a radical Islam. Like, this is why radical Islam has an appeal, is because it tells it values these young men that we trash as a society, and it gives them a pathway, and it affirms them and their importance. And so that is what I think evangelicalism could do, because it has the power to pivot and because it has a flexible infrastructure. If it can capture the that vision like that Peterson was expressing for young men and get them, and it needs to actually fulfill on the promise. It needs to actually use its infrastructure to provide pathways for them to grow and develop and build a future. Then they will be able to direct the course of culture. And I think that would be a better culture if evangelical Christianity had a greater voice, because of the very nature of its the evangelical nature of it. It has places for everybody. The hard work is realizing that you can't just it's not just one size fits all. And so this is where really the final important aspect of it is embracing this metagelical movement. And that means that within a town, perhaps all the different churches need to find a way to work together. And that's probably one of their bigger hurdles to overcome. But I think it's doable. And I think it's more, that is a move that's probably easier right now for like the evangelicals, as opposed to the Orthodox or someone who still are, their exclusionary aspect is a desire to be the elite, which, like a winner take all move. And you have to do the Christ move. You have to put yourself last for the sake of everybody. So that is the rant that I had, and now I will share the link for anyone who is able to come on and correct me if I'm wrong, if you will, following the comments. And so I don't know if everybody's getting what I was trying to put out, but I'm more than happy to explain what I mean if anything was confusing about that. Chad, I forgot to bring a drink. My throat's getting dry. I don't want to just rant endlessly. That's how you get in trouble. I might start talking about the things that are going on Twitter. Yes, this is a problem, embodying the message we broadcast. And that's where I think Peterson essentially, he was doing that, but he's one man. And we have a real big problem that I think came from the boomers' self-reliance, which is just a natural product of the fact that, well, there's more boomers than boomer parents. And then they valued that self-reliance, and they said, I learned it the hard way, and that's what's best for my kid too. And that's just not true. You should share the wisdom that you've gained freely. Hello, David.
Hello, Mr. Sartori. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm good. Busy day. I just wanted to jump on for 2 minutes. I liked what you were saying, and I had some thoughts on it as well. Which is, I'm kind of wondering about the necessity of the failure of the universities. And is there any possibility that the university themselves can adapt to these things? Because the issue is the reliability of the degree. I understand that people won't accept a degree from Peterson Academy. I just don't know if it's going to be necessary at all, because like my brother is a coder and was recruited by Google a while back, and it was just because of what he did professionally. He didn't go to university. That wasn't part of it. It was just like they reached out to him because they could see what he was Googling.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so are these institutions going to exist at all? Is even something like Peterson Academy going to be something that goes away? I dated my way into my my profession, and they were just like they had bigger problems with people who were educated for my job than they were with me. And so when they needed to hire someone else, they said, "Dave, you hire someone." Like, and I got to just pick one
Yeah.
of my friends.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think it obviously depends on fields, on what field it is. Like, and I would say, like, within my company, like now, as it stands now, like my boss prefers hiring people that have less experience more
Yeah.
than more experience if it's, experience that was achieved in a questionable way, or if they're not, because they may, it's harder to adapt everything to doing it our way rather than just learning our way from scratch.
Right.
um I think by necessity colleges are going to kind of get more like lean and efficient. Like they're going to have to cut the fat. Like I think they're
Mm-hmm.
they already have some of that. um because now it's like, I can't remember whichever ones it is out there in California where the ratio of like administrators to students is like 1-to-1. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah. It's insane.
yeah, that's not, yeah,
Well, and
that's,
like there was an episode of the show Weeds where the woman tries to work for a politician, and she's been a drug dealer or whatever for so long, so she makes a fake resume, and the politician just says, "Look, all of your references are clearly fake, but this is a really well-made fake resume. So I'm going to give you the job because you know what's needed." So she gets the job with the guy knowing it was fake, but you're like, "Good job faking it, right? Like that's good enough."
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's, yeah. I mean, I think there's going to be limits. Like, when it comes to like medicine and stuff like that. I mean, although we have a lot of medical
Right.
malpractice too, and then you get into the question about like AIs and robots and what things are
Yeah.
those things going to be good at.
Well, the medical thing is an issue outside of this though, because of people immigrating and having been taught overseas.
Mhm.
Like, is someone who is qualified to be a doctor in Pakistan, are they able to be a nurse here without any training? Or, like, you know what I mean? Like, is there any transference
Well, I
to that
wonder. We'll
degree?
see. But so that is the thing where it's because there's this kind of governing body that decides about standards and
Hmm.
things. Because if you got rid of that, maybe you would have, this is Canadian medicine, this is Pakistani medicine, this is Chinese
Yeah.
medicine, and it could be that maybe people find out like they have different strengths and weaknesses or something. Like maybe
Mhm.
people will be like, oh, you got like I don't know, you got cancer, well, you should go to the Canadian doctor, but if you got like
Mhm.
I don't know, some other thing, it's better to go to the
I
Chinese
Look, man. I'm
medicine.
because I'm from Windsor, which is right across from Detroit. This actually happened. Different medical issues, you'd cross the border.
Yeah.
You get it done in the U.S. or get it done in Canada, right? It's free, and it's basically the same, or it'll cost a lot more, but you're probably gonna have better care, right? Pick which one you want.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, it's tough because it's like the thing is that you can't just go the free market thing, because the free market or whatever. Well, it's the problem is that the way the markets are set up is it's just for like profit, so everything is reduced to like profit, and it
Yeah,
doesn't.
yeah,
And that's like a neutral value, and it turns out that we're really bad at translating that into like values that are good for human thriving or whatever, like because it makes us prone to waste money on things like gambling and drugs and prostitution or
yeah.
whatever. If everything is like legal and available, then you need some other thing to help guide people in what to do with that, which is the role of the church, I would say. So that's part of why and that's part of why, like, a church should be interested in shaping the culture of the future, because it should help people to make better choices with their time and money and all that stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, the idea that like if you get trained in medicine somewhere else, like different cultures, like I don't want to get too like relativistic here, but medicine can get so subjective as far as what a different culture would even interpret as a disease. And once you get into the field of who's reading medical anthropology, things get
Yeah.
really, really wild. And I mean, just thinking about like a culture that a lot, like if you're trained as a doctor in a culture where, say, like medical euthanasia is an acceptable medical practice, you've got some really different presuppositions for what counts as care encoded into how you were trained.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Speaking of different countries having different treatment, I definitely don't want to get old in Canada. I think,
Well, yeah,
I
that's
think that
just
might be
showing, like,
dangerous.
that's because that's the
Why,
problem.
David? They can cure that.
That's just
Yeah.
showing you like how a culture shapes like the values of the people,
Right.
and essentially that's this cheap solution to so many problems, but those problems are only because of, like, from the standpoint of a government that's trying to manage a population, like, and in a very brutal way, just looking at like dollars and cents, or looking at just these numbers of it's just like, oh, if we eliminate these people, then our problem goes away. And it's like, now you're really evil. You didn't solve
The
the problem.
biggest problem with the elderly is that they exist.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem with the elderly, is their existence.
Yes, it would require institutions to admit their shortcomings honestly. And I mean, I think we're obviously heading towards a moment of cultural change, because we have you can point, and that's even the thing. It's like people have everybody has these theories that are like based on the thing that they've most focused in on as like the key aspect of like what's wrong. But then when you realize
Mhm.
there's so many different theories about different things that are all the key aspect of what's wrong, then you realize, oh, it's just like the whole thing is all what's wrong. And so there's it's like there is going to be a major shift. It's just like, is it going to be a Stone Age collapse? Is it going to be like Star Trek? Or is it going to be something else really weird and like we have no idea? But we, there are people that are in more and less positions to have a say in that. And I don't think that, I think some of the problem is that, okay, like maybe this is a problem, I would say, for evangelical churches. Like evangelical churches that have been so used to being a non-elite, like forming in reaction to like a main line, and defaulting to like the populist kind of position, that they just naturally defer. But we're in a moment where there's nobody that's going to tell. It's the person. It's anybody could be the one that tells everybody like what to do. Like it's a free for all, and it's so. They should step in there, because I think they actually have the best values overall. But yeah, why did you say this, Andrew? Made isn't about money. Yeah, I mean, it's like about being. They just like being evil, right? The people that did it. Money's supposed to benefit the savings or whatever.
Mhm.
Well,
I think it's one of those you're committed ultimately to something like the cost savings of certain medical practices. If that's your totalizing value, You're
Oh no. Everybody went away. It wasn't me. So the medical thing is interesting. It was more of a sidetrack. I think the main thing is that, there used to be a college or army or trades. Like those were like the three choices. And then, you could go to army and then you could go to college, or you could go to the army and then you go work in the trades. But now it's like college is not a good option. People distrust the military more, and there's no more trades. We don't have shop class, so you have to go to a specific trade school, which in and of itself requires knowledge and guidance to be directed toward that stream. So basically, our schools are failing at sorting for people, sorting people as to what the future they should be pursuing. I think, and especially I think with the male female thing, after the Industrial Revolution, you kind of have like this managerial class that rises, and it turns out like women are just really better at doing a lot of that stuff than a lot of men are. So school even disfavors the men that way. So yeah, they are
oh my
starving.
gosh,
It's
dude,
just
dude. So
the pipeline is to get people there needs to be reestablished.
talk about like put in a position where you don't want to intentionally do evil. There's a couple years where I was working as a middle school teacher, and it's just one being the cop at the front of the room, realizing what the system is doing to middle school boys, and as much as I want to free them from that, I still need them to shut up and sit down so I can do my job to dispense learning. It's because of the nature of the system. Even if I personally dislike it and want to alleviate it, like couldn't get around it. The system constrained my actions to a dramatic extent.
Yeah, school's a big problem. I mean, I would say like that probably even beyond like college. It's I mean, it's interesting because like in the school here in the city here, we have like there's a lot of charter schools, and there's some of them that are like these like great books, kind of classical education ones, and there's a bunch of like STEM ones like math and science. But there are as far as I know, there aren't really like any kind of charter schools designed for getting people into things like the trades. Or even I don't know, like entrepreneurialism or anything like that. And so it's still really like just showing, it's just like a lesser reflection of just that old college. It still reflects the colleges. It's like the sciences and the humanities, but it's missing that the whole aspect of people that actually make and do things.
The tecton, right?
Yeah.
Someone should start school about that.
Well, maybe this or some other video will go viral, and then I'll try to seize my moment when I see it.
So I know it's mostly like a vision right now. Are you like, is there an age group you're hoping to start your project off with? Like, is it like post high school?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, I saw it best, most envisioning it as just a post high school kind of a thing. But then I realized, especially when I found more about it, like, so like I knew I had ADHD since I was like a kid, and so the ADHD types or the autistic types or stuff like that, like, yeah, those kids could probably, especially the boys, use a school that's like way more physical and hands-on and less sitting still from even early ages. So that could be I think that would be a really good thing to eventually build. That's just a lot harder to start from scratch. I just kind of thought of it as the most lean way to start would either just be to have like a volunteer thing, like run through a church on like Saturday mornings, Saturdays or whatever, just volunteer men and young guys from the church, or anybody who has a business to bring on like apprentices, and just as many, whether it's 1 or 10 or depending on how big a business is, because then it's just adapting a thing that already exists, which is kind of the whole point of what I was saying with
Right.
Peterson's thing. He didn't have anything that he could kind of bolt his ideas onto. If the evangelical church had kind of gotten a better grasp of like, it's just the thing of like, but are they accepting Jesus in their heart? Like, that's all that matters. And it's like,
yeah, yep.
That's it's just, yeah. And that's just really, that message is just hitting such a small portion of the population as it's been, because it's still being presented the same way.
Yeah. I was gonna say like 3 different things and I've lost them all, or can't focus on one here. But
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, because I was listening to you talking on the House of Woo the other day, and I realized what the cessationist woo is.
oh, go on.
So the cessationist woo is the belief that anybody can just like pick up a King James Bible, and that's all it takes to become a Christian and then become a pastor and start a church, like, and all of that is legit. It just starts from opening up the Bible.
Just say the words like a magic spell.
It's the
there's even like folk evangelical stories about that thing happening. I'm sure you've heard the story of like a guy who was like passing out tracts door to door, tore one up and threw it on the ground, and the cleaning guy came up later, picked it up, pieced it together, and got saved. I'm sure you've heard that one, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's
stuff
even
like that.
Francis Schaeffer, like after C.S. Lewis, probably the most impactful 20th century apologist, and he got saved because he wanted to read he decided to read the Bible out of a sense of intellectual honesty. So it's powerful.
Yeah. And it's so like important. Like I just went through sort of like a secular great books reading group through Moby Dick, and I became like de facto the group's Bible guy because of how much of Melville's prose is like he's playing with the Bible, he's riffing on the Bible, he's alluding to the Bible, developing themes through like echoing scripture. It's just something that's constantly happening. And I was just like, guys, I'm reading a totally different book from you because you guys don't have this subtext, which is just blaring constantly.
Yeah. And I think that, it's interesting because, and obviously, like, there's a connection there, something like Moby Dick. But those connections are also like in everything else that everybody likes now. They just haven't been. It's just now we're going from a place where maybe. Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure a lot more of it was intentional back then because everybody was actively like going to church and reading the Bible and being taught it. But even still, like, the job is always to like identify those things and make the connection, because the Bible's like eternal. So it's just as relevant to all the weird stuff that goes on YouTube and, in whatever is interesting to people's lives now. It's just making the connection. And that's where I feel like it's weird because like even evangelicalism is, you can see how other traditions are trapped in time. Like the Orthodox is real obvious. But it's like you look like the Amish. It's like that's like the 19th century or whatever. And like the evangelical church is kind of like aspects of it stuck in like, I don't know, the 90s.
We're stuck in the 80s, the 80s, the 90s.
Definitely like the fundamentalist churches. They're like stuck in the 80s. And then like maybe the other ones are like a little bit ahead, but yeah, it's like, and even if they update the like trappings as far as the music without that like translation of thoughts and ideas, it still like requires you to learn to speak in Christianese or whatever. So yeah, I definitely noticed that way more here in the South.
Yeah, I mean, this is why you gotta like make the move to go from like a particular contextualization for a moment to a living tradition. We've got to figure out how does this thing grow? How does this thing evolve over time?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the question. And one of the things that I'm again like looking at all of my kind of like peers that I went through seminary with and whatnot, and we're like, just because we are from a different time from our elders, we're metabolizing all the truths they're teaching us in seminary just a little bit differently because we know who we're trying to talk to. And so it's coming out different. It's coming out in a way that's a little bit foreign to our elder generation's ears. And we're like totally bought in, totally trying to be faithful to what we've received and also reach those around us. And it's sort of a mixed bag how well we're received by the previous generation.
Yeah. I think, yeah, and I definitely think there needs to be more of the tribalism kind of has to end or whatever. I think, I think it probably does already in some ways. Like, because I don't know. It's like, it's funny because like if maybe you have some of the people that are into orthodoxy and they're real like they like the exclusivity of it, and then it's like, okay, well, once you're married and you have kids or whatever, and you have the choice, like because they don't have as much of the infrastructure outside of the church itself. So it's like, are you going to send your kids to public school, or are you going to send them to like the school run by the evangelicals or something, and it's like, well, at that point you're like, this is the lesser of two evils. So there's already things like that, because that at the school I used to work at, it was like, yeah, there was people from a lot of different types of churches. Actually, it's kind of funny. So even PVK, some of his cousin, because I lived right near where his mom and a lot of his other relatives lived. So one of his cousins was sending his kids to our school, which was run by the Assemblies of God, instead of the CRC school that was in like the next town over. I guess they went to like a more extreme Reformed church, but I think probably a lot of it was because it was way cheaper. Like the CRC school was pretty expensive, and ours was cheap. It was like mostly just like it was just the moms all taught there and for free tuition, and so
yeah. Similar picture where I worked. It was a small kind of like for 60 years there was like explicitly like a Baptist like Christian school, and then the last like 2 years it was like, all right, we're gonna drop the Baptist and become like explicitly evangelical. Big tent, because that's what our student body is at this point. Like there's not very many like restrictivist fundamentalist Baptists in the area anymore. But I was a little bit against that move just because I think it's better to allow diversity in while still maintaining we have a specific tradition, because that also gives you that certain, again, like confessional guidelines that everyone can rally around. Because then you have to deal with the question of like, okay, you've got your third grade teacher who doesn't believe in dinosaurs talking to kids, and that's a hard one to handle.
Yeah. It's funny. I saw somebody somehow, like, this guy came up. It was like some little tiny channel, like 20 subscribers and like 14 views on the video. And it was like a guy just in his car. And he was just talking about how, like, it was like the most basic thing about, he's like, I found out like most people just tend to believe what they're taught. But there's like churches out there that teach different things. And he had a very much like a Baptist, maybe not to non-denom, view on things. And maybe I should go back and leave a comment or whatever, but I was essentially going to say, like, the thing is that it's just like the problem comes now in the internet. The problem comes with the pastors that still just say the one thing that we believe as true without acknowledging the existence of the other opinions. Like, man, maybe this is just my pet peeve or whatever, but it's just like, because my pet, our current pastor does that sometimes. He does kind of like, sometimes he'll kind of wrestle with the text in the midst of his message. He pretty much just he actually just preaches like straight out of the Logos Bible software. So he's
Uh-huh.
like showing us like how he's studying it or whatever as he does it.
Okay.
But it's sort of like, now there's other people that believe believe this passage means this way, but we believe it means this, and like, or just to, we're pretty sure this is the right way to do it. Obviously there's that just means you have to prioritize your like tiers of most essential doctrines or whatever.
Right.
But you get a
that's
lot
the
of
thing that
where the confession is like, this confession is the perfect embodiment of all the doctrines.
Yeah, it's again the question of how you're going to hold that. But one of the nice things this does is just say like, yeah, there's certain things that were decided by the larger body in ages past, and we just agreed that this is the slot of Christendom or the kingdom of God we occupy. This is our lane, and we're not going to drive past the yellow or the yellow on the left or the white on the right. This is just where we are. Because yeah, we can argue about everything all of the time forever and get nothing done.
Yeah. So so the things that I'm now working on, and so I took a sliver out of my book that was like the most central thing, kind of like centered around the trade school idea a little bit, but then I added a part about the embodiment and the issue of like credibility, or really just integrity. If what you say matches with what you do, people will trust you, your kids will believe you, they'll follow you in your footsteps. If you are trying, basically anytime you try to use deception, it backfires. Or you have to, unless if you have such a massively powerful organizational structure that you can keep people, from finding out the truth, it's going to backfire. I mean, at this point, it's like it's over. For most, like even like the Scientologists and stuff, it's like anytime anybody from any weird cult, as soon as they get on the internet, it's over.
Yeah.
But so like obviously trying to start a new like community, if that's your way where you're going to do it, is not the right move. But I do think the other thing is that we've lost, like, and this is a big problem for like the evangelical church, is that they have lost like the concept of normativity, and that like there is a normative kind of path for a person's life, and like, which I would say like probably, like to say like the normative path is for most people to get married and have kids, and it's like, but Paul says it's okay to be single, and it's like, so we can't say that, and it's like, no, that is an exception, and I think contextually, I think it's like there's a reason why we have letters to all these different churches, and if you look at like in Revelation where you got them all together in one book, they obviously are very different contexts, and very different contexts need a different wisdom. And that's sort of like, yes, it's like all true for all time, but the truth is applicable in which eternal truth is applicable today is probably dependent on the context and the similarity to some historical context. So and so that's like, okay, well, if you look at like Corinth, where people were kind of going nuts with the temple prostitutes or whatever, that was probably a good time to say, it's okay to not get married or whatever. And I think probably especially for the women, because for the women in that culture, it's like that if they just get married to some dude, like there's a lot of chances it could be not a good situation. But
I mean, that was like the first like real sociological crisis for the church, is what do we do with the widows? That's all over First Timothy. I mean, you see it in Acts. It's and just the effect that like who you marry has on your faith is huge.
Yeah. But it's just the way that it's kind of gotten like and like, I don't know, and I guess it's just the thing of like, because we don't think it's fair like to say like not everybody gets what they want or whatever, but like, well, that's what like grace is for, and the great his grace is sufficient, because it's like there's something, there is a trade-off to those being one of those exceptions. It's not just better and worse, Like there's
Mhm.
actually a trade-off. The problem is that when our culture makes incentivizes being one of the exceptions, and then people don't, because that's the thing. It's like a lot of people are like, oh, if you don't have to get married, like, well, getting married is a pain in the butt, and it's like, well, I think a little bit more people have to, you know, it's a risk. It is a risky venture, but you have to at least ask yourself, like, is God calling me to consider this? You don't just get to say I'm not going to because it's a hassle.
No, I mean, I am most of those fringe cases in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But I think I might have kind of been built for this in a way that most aren't. I mean, I
Yeah.
hear folks, talk about like the fringes and the holy fools and those on the edge of the wilderness. And, there's a lot of freedom there. There's a lot of, you get to do crazy esoteric things. And the nature of being on the fringe is that it's a place of, that's not where social honor is given. So
Yeah.
I have to deal with the fact that I'm not going to get much like public acclamation for whatever work I do for my social occupation. There's just a lot of costs.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I mean, I'm that way in some aspects. Even though I got into the married club, that's fun. But it's like I have yet to find a church like confession or something that I could say like I wholeheartedly agree to all of this, or people that I'm like I see exactly eye to eye on you and all these things like or whatever um and
you just play the game of when you're joining a church, like, all right, how many gravabbins can I carve out before they throw me out?
Oh no! Well, that's the thing, and I just say it's like I'm a postmodernist, and so I can be like, I could figure out a way to sign almost any confession in good conscience, but it might not be me accepting those statements the same way the pastor's thinking about them. So yeah, it's it's but that is part of the thing that drives me to do things, because it's like, and I think, um, there's like the thing with the sower and the seeds, like the problem, all of the seed is good, but the problem is with the soil, and we can be more intentional with our application of where we spread the seed, but we could also work to cultivate the soil and make the soil better prepared to receive that seed. And so I think that's kind of like that's kind of the issue I see in a lot of like churches or whatever, or they're spreading the seed and they're getting the fruit that they always get, but they're not noticing the areas where it's not
Yeah.
doing so well.
I mean, that's the embodiment thing. That's the
Yeah.
parables of the leaven. Like our presence in our community should have an effect on the community. That is the kind of like tilling process.
Yeah.
Like we're hopefully always broadcasting, always spreading that seed, but there's also like what can we do to turn the soil over?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I kind of feel like sort of what evangelicalism is. We're just like the leading edge of the. I'm not a farmer, so I don't know what the thing that tears the soil up. We're the churn.
A
We're the ones
cultivator.
that right. We've got a lot of energy. We've got a lot of sincerity. Not necessarily the most strategic of thinkers at all times, but we're just kicking the dirt up with whatever tools we have at our hands.
Yeah. 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 But yeah, I think it is kind of weird. I don't know, like I don't know. Um, I see like a lot of people talking about like being intentional and all this stuff, but it's like always just directed at doing just a tweaked version of the same old thing that they always do or whatever. Like the creative imagination is lacking somewhat or whatever. Um,
Yeah. I mean, that's once we have a little bit of. I know once we start to build even our small institutions, that makes us more conservative. Once we have buildings to pay for, once we have communities that we're accountable to. Like you can't get too crazy before people start giving you side eye.
Yeah. But you know. Well, I just heard the kids are home now, so I'm gonna get off here. But it was good talking with you,
Likewise.
and I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
For
Thursday,
sure,
if
for
not
sure.
sooner. All right.
Yeah. All right. Take it easy.
Yeah.